Debord, but of concealing the fact that the real is no longer real, and thus saving the reality principle, the fact that something is real, rather than everything's just signs a third of signs, and you don't actually get anywhere. So, if you think of yourself, when you actually think of yourself, well, Baudrillard can't be right there, because I can conceive myself as an I, and I conceive of people who, or say objects which are separate from me. It's kind of like this relation here, that you conceive yourself as an I, only to kind of, as a device made by the entire system, so you understand the system as real, to save the reality principle. That's the function of it. It's got no actual function of yourself as an actual I, it's only got a function to represent yourself as different from the rest of reality. If we go back to the toothbrushes, so as I said about this one, woo, spectacular and stuff, and this one's clearly more real, isn't it? Because it's pink and blue and green, and so this one kind of makes these look more real, more like a real toothbrush, more like just the kind of thing your granddad would use, just functional. You just want a stick with some hair on the end, But what's the essence of a toothbrush? What's a real toothbrush? There's no real toothbrush. There's no real eye. There's no reality in terms of America or Disneyland. Do you want to pass on there again? So, yeah, I'm going to just go back to Debord now. And Debord wrote something after this, which I think is very, very telling, because he got more alcoholic and depressed and all these type of things. And you think, well, I don't know whether you agree with Debord, you agree with Baudrillard on this one, whether you're a Marxist or a postmodern, they're very much contrary ideas. But Debord does kind of review his ideas later, which is more similar to Baudrillard, but which is in essence, in terms of the fact it still conceives that separation between reality and illusion to be there, but it's still a lot more pessimistic. And it's in comments to the Sight of the Spectacle to 1987. Where he comes across with a new type of spectacle, no longer the diffuse, and it's no longer the concentrated, it's the integrated spectacle, which is a combination of the two. And he sees this as like the worst of both worlds, put together. As something which is just the ultimate spectacular, horrible life that he didn't really want to live in. So, the integrated spectacle is simultaneously concentrated and diffuse. As regards concentration, the controlling centre has now become a cult, never to be occupied by a known leader or clear ideology. So if you think of Tory and Labour, who you're going to vote for, you don't really care really. You're probably just going to draw a big cock on it. And and you don't actually know if the Prime Minister actually runs things, because he gets lobbied by all these, by Sky and Tesco, and you don't know who to blame. In terms of the police, they can kill someone on the street and then they can cover their badge upon their arm. You can't really find someone who's accountable. So, in terms of authority, you don't know where to go. You don't know who to, people just defer you onto other people. You never actually get anywhere. There's no centre of spectacular power, as it were. So, democracy's crap. On the diffuse side, the spectacle has never before put its mark on almost all the full range of socially produced behaviour and objects. So, in terms of capitalism, capitalism has to constantly spread. If you're creating money out of more money, which is what capital does, you've got to have a certain amount of growth, a concomitant growth in products and services. Otherwise, that bit of growth will turn into inflation. So capitalism constantly has to expand. In terms of, say, sustainable development, it's a contradiction in terms. You can't have sustainable development. When people are concerned about environmentalism at the moment and how are we all going to burn to death in 30, 40 years or drown or something, people say, well, maybe we can buy our way out. And no, you can't. You can't keep on developing, you can't keep on expanding all over the world and it to be sustainable. So, and also what capitalism does is it goes into other countries, it goes everywhere, is it creates reality in all these different places. And you need to think of this now. Think of, say, the in America, when the Puritans went over there in the Mayflower, and then they said, well, no one's really here, so they start developing, then they found some people and they shot them, but they're not real people, it doesn't really matter. They're not civilized man. There's the sense between you and the other. Capitalism has created a reality and doesn't see anything other than itself. It only knows itself to the distinction of the other, which is contradiction. But in terms of growth, it grows over, it takes over relations between all people, everyone is sucked into it. As some sort of bourgeois individual, you just have to carry on. And in terms of the fall of the Berlin Wall, I don't know if he wrote this before that, he probably wouldn't have done, but the Soviet Union's coming to an end anyway. Diffuse capitalism is certainly winning. This is kind of the feeling that Debord's getting on about everything. So the final sense, the integrated spectacle, is that it's integrated itself into reality to the same extent as it was describing it. It's no longer just reality trying to say what the world is, say what reality is, something which is lying to you. It's actually that as well. The two come very close together. Very close together, not quite the same hyperreal as Debord, but very close. The spectacle now permeates all reality, so it goes through. But I say that sounds as if, yes, the two have come together. This capitalist delusion and what we think of our essence and what reality should be, the two have collapsed in the same thing, we can now no longer distinguish one from the other. And that's what you would think from this. But you do get there's a little bit of justice at the end of this. I don't know if it's really justice, actually, but there's a point at the end which Debord makes, which is one thing of the weakness of the spectacle. And let's think, if you went back to history, the spectacle destroys all history. It doesn't want any idea of any other part from itself. So it's why America puts loads impositions on Cuba. It doesn't want socialist reality to work. It probably won't anyway. I'm not going to say it would, but it's probably the wrong audience to say that to. But in terms of, it doesn't want to see anything apart from itself, so capitalism doesn't want to see anything as well in history or geographically either. But this is a disadvantage to it, because a perfect democracy, he doesn't like democracy at this point, wishes to be judged by its enemies rather than by its results. Oh, sorry, I'm talking about something else here. Here we go. To the list of triumphs of the spectacle's powers, we should however add one result which has proved negative. Once the running of a state involves a permanent and massive shortage of historical knowledge, that state can no longer be led strategically. The glaring example of that is the recent Iraq War, and he's writing this in 1987. And it would make politicians skin crawl think that someone so beyond the pale as Debord would be right about something like that. But people with something like the Iraq War and loads of things like this, where Tony Blair says there's no precedent for this in history, we've got to have loads of powers to do what we like, to invade other countries preemptively, to create loads of policies and terrorism where you can hold people without charge. Say that this is unprecedented, say it's a new reality, say there's nothing before, it all messes up. And Debord predicted in 1987. Just sort of talk, I'll make this point anyway. Perfect democracy. This is something to do with terrorism, by the way, how terrorists are created as a separate state. This is just a thing at the end, which I should have said before. But a perfect democracy wishes to be judged by its enemies rather than by its results. The story of terrorism is written by the state and is therefore highly instructive. The spectators of the terrorist spectacle must certainly never know everything about terrorism, but compared with terrorism, everything else must be acceptable, or in any case, more rational and democratic. And to go back to this Baudrillard thing, this was meant to go to the point previously, but is Debord coming to this Baudrillard idea of reality and the illusion coming together, like Baudrillard is, like Disneyland in America, like the terrorists which are awful, so therefore we're okay, and he kind of resists it towards the end, but he's a lot more negative when he's writing, coming to the side of the spectacle. He's still holding on to his main principles, but eventually I think he shoots himself in 1994. And that's it. You want to see the film? Okay. I know I'll open it to discussion if I want to make a point.